now we're going to create some animation in Revit. Revit calls animation walkthrough. It just simply allows you to see what it's like to walk through the model, the building that you've just created. So right now, I'm over here in floor plans. Open up the floor plan for 0101 lower level. We're going to create our walkthrough in plan. What you do is create a path for the camera to follow, and the images produced by that camera become your animation, your walkthrough animation. So if you haven't done so yet, go down to floor plans here at the lower level in project browser, open up 01 lower level, and we're just going to create one small portion of animation. And the whole idea with doing animation is you create a series of different shots, different animated shots, and then you use an editing software, something like Windows Movie Maker, to weave those shots of animation together into a longer, more finished piece of animation that you could then present to a client. So once you've opened up O1 lower level and you're seeing our floor plan of our house on the hill like this, go to the top of the screen and along the tabs here, click on View. And then under View, go to the icon for 3D View, and we're going to click on the little arrow here, the drop-down arrow, and we're going to select Walkthrough. And if we click on Walkthrough, you'll see that suddenly our cursor is now across. And what we do in this stage is we're going to create the path that the camera is going to follow, and then we're going to mess with the settings and kind of make the imagery look better, and then we're going to export our piece of animation. So right now, in creating the walkthrough, we're simply going to create the path that the camera is going to follow as it explores the lower level of our house. What I like to do for something like this, I'm actually going to start on the outside. My intention is to start over here somewhere outside of our building so we actually see the outside of our house as the animation is beginning, and then we're going to kind of bust through a window pane here and just kind of fly around here. Here's our table and couch and some people, and maybe just kind of as the camera works its way around here, end up maybe at the bottom of the flight of stairs here. So let's do this. Let's put our cursor, let's start it well outside of our house, to the east of our house like this, and I'm going to click the button. And by doing so, you can see this kind of triangular shape is emerging from my cursor. This is the cone of vision. This shows me what it is that the left and right extents of what my camera is seeing. And what you want to do is just kind of move in the direction that you want your camera to go. And anytime you need your camera to change direction, even very slightly, just click on the mouse, and that will put a little joint in our path and allow us to kind of adjust how the camera is moving. So I've clicked once to start this off. I'm going to click a second time. I'm just going to kind of click through here a few times, just creating a curving path, busting through that window. It's okay if we do that. I'm going to kind of come up through here in between where the stair is and our table. Just kind of cruise along here towards the couch and then make a kind of a sharp turn around the couch, and maybe I can even squeeze in between our two people here. And just kind of, I'm improvising, I'm making this up as I go along, but I'm just thinking of things that might be interesting to see in our camera shot, maybe down the hallway here, and then we just kind of turn around and just keep clicking. And then I'm going to kind of end up right here at the stair. At this point, I think I'm happy with how this path is going to look. I really don't know how this is going to look until the animation gets rendered, but I suspect that this will be an interesting path for my camera to follow. Once I'm done, and I don't want to add any more nodes, I don't want to add any more angles or camera positions, I'm going to click on the Finish Walkthrough button. And now it's kind of locked in that path here. There's my path. It's locked in. You can see my cursor the cross is gone. Now what we're going to do is we're going to edit some of the settings in our walkthrough. I'm not actually going to use this Edit Walkthrough button. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the project browser in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and I'm going to scroll down past floor plans, past ceiling plans, past 3D views, past elevations, there's actually a category here for walkthroughs. You can see it right after renderings. And if we hit the little plus beside walkthroughs, we can see walkthrough 1. And I can double click on it. This walkthrough 1 is the walkthrough that we just created. If I were to create, I could create as many walkthroughs as I want to in this model, and they'd each be numbered walkthrough 2, walkthrough 3, walkthrough 4. And when you double click on walkthrough 1, what we're seeing is the last camera position in our sequence of events. So where the camera ended up, the very last place my camera was before I hit finish walkthrough, that's what we're seeing here. So now, once I've double clicked on this and I've got the view of the end point of my camera, here I can make some changes to make this animation look a lot more polished. So to do that, I am now going to go over to my properties window. Remember, the properties window applies to anything that's selected in your model. We happen to select walkthrough 1, so these properties all apply to walkthrough 1. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over here to detail level, and medium comes up by default. I'm going to change that to fine detail. I want to see as much in this animation as I possibly can. So I'm going to set detail level for fine. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Visibility graphic overrides, if I clicked on this, if there were things that I didn't want someone to see in this model, if for some reason I wanted to turn off the stairs or remove the roof, I could turn those off and then hit OK, and those would be hidden in my animation. In this case, I'm not going to worry about any of this. I'm fine showing everything. But we will go to graphic display options, and if I click on edit for graphic display options, this window comes up, and we've got a whole bunch of different things that we can change to make our animation look a little more exciting. So if you click on these little triangles, you can open up each and every one of these categories. So let's open up the category for model display, and under style, hidden line just refers to white. Everything's white with black outlines, and it's kind of drab looking. So let's change that from hidden line to realistic. And we could either uncheck or check show edges. That just means turn on or off the outlines. I'm going to leave the outlines on here. And then smooth lines with anti-aliasing, I could either check that or uncheck that. What that does is it kind of de-emphasizes the outlines in your animation. It's going to make your animation look better, but I think also by checking it, it will take the computer longer to render your animation. So for right now, I'm going to leave show edges checked. I'm going to uncheck smooth lines with the anti-aliasing. As you're creating future walkthroughs, feel free to mess around with all these settings and see what works and what doesn't work. So realistic is what we're going to select here. I'm going to go to shadows. I'm not going to worry about this. I could check the box that say cast shadows, and then every item in my animation would be producing shadows. I don't know that that's going to add all that much to the end result, but it will make it take longer to render the animation. So for what we're doing here, I'm not gonna check either of these. But like I said earlier, feel free as you're working on Revit models and creating walkthrough, mess around with all these settings and see what you like. I'm gonna close shadows. Sketchy lines, I'm not going to do this either. Sketchy lines, it just is a setting where you can make all the outlines look kind of sketchy, as though they were drawn, hand-drawn, like some kind of hand-drawn animation. I'm not going to worry about that for what we're doing here. But I will go to lighting, and under lighting, we're going to change the lighting scheme. By default, exterior sun only comes up. I'm going to change that to interior, sun, and artificial. So just like when we did our renderings earlier, we're telling the computer that for the most part, our camera is inside the building. It's an interior piece of animation, and we want light to come from both the sun and from whatever artificial lights we've placed in there. Sun setting, I'm not going to really worry about that too much. Artificial lights, I'm not going to adjust any of the settings on the artificial lights. I think this will suffice for what we're doing. But I will go, so I'll close that one up. I'll go to photographic exposure. Automatic is set here. I'm just going to leave it at that. And then finally, background. If I open up background, By default, there's nothing in the background here. Beyond our trees outside of our house, we're just going to see a whole lot of nothing if we leave that as none. Let's set that instead for sky. So Revit will automatically put a sky in on beyond our trees there. When you select a background, it also asks you for ground color. Gray is the default. Let's click on that. Let's select kind of a green that looks grassy. We want where the ground plane is occurring, we want it to look like green grass. So I'm going to click on that and hit OK. I'm going to hit apply. And once we hit apply, you can actually see what it's going to look like. That looks a lot better than what it did previously. We've got some sky, we've got some natural looking trees out there. The whole thing looks more realistic. And like I said, if you mess around with this and turn off the outlines and turn on shadows and things like that, it will really punch this up. It will look better, but just bear in mind, it will add to the amount of time it takes for the computer to render this. So it's kind of a trade-off. Okay, and then I'm going to hit OK. So we've changed our graphic display. Let's scroll down a little bit here. I'm not going to worry about sun path here, but if I wanted to, I could have the sun in motion or in a certain location in the sky, but I'm not going to worry about that here. Go down where it says far clip active, uncheck that box. What that means is, and I think I explained it on an earlier video, far clip just tells Revit that after a certain amount of distance, you stop seeing things. And I think the default setting here is 100 feet. So what the computer is being told, if that box were checked, is 100 feet away, don't show anything on beyond that. And that can look really weird if suddenly there are big white blank areas in your field of view just because there's stuff more than 100 feet away. So in this case, uncheck far clip active. Keep scrolling down. Take a look at rendering settings. Let's take a minute and change these. For quality of rendering settings, let's just say, for this instance, we'll just say low. Draft will give you an idea of what something looks like, but that is really pixelated, really crude looking. For what we're doing, for this exercise, low is good. Medium is probably fine. I think medium, there's not a whole lot of difference between medium appearance and high, except it just takes longer to render. For this instance, I'm simply going to do low just because I don't want this to take forever to render. I think medium is a good one because it doesn't take forever to render and it still looks pretty good. Lighting scheme, again, let's tell it interior, sun, and artificial. Sky, few clouds. Let's change that to very few clouds. The fewer the clouds you have, the more the sunlight that gets through. Since this is inside, I don't think we really need to worry about a whole lot of clouds in the sky. And let's hit OK. Let's go back over to our properties menu because there's one more thing that we really need to be conscious of, and that's this category here. It's called walkthrough frames, and by default, it's set for 300. Let's click on walkthrough frames. Or maybe we click on 300. Okay, this window comes up. What this is this is how we're going to tell Revit how long this camera shot needs to last. We've already set up our camera path. We start from the outside, we bust through the window, we kind of fly around the living room, we fly in between our people, we fly under the mezzanine and then kind of make a sharp turn and end up at the stairs. So that's our sequence that we've created. We need to now picture in our mind's eye how long that camera shot should last. Should that take 30 seconds to get from the start to the end point? Should it take 10 seconds to get from start to finish? Should it take 2 seconds to get from start to finish? So kind of mentally picture how long we want that camera shot to last. So in my mind's eye, I'm picturing it, and I'm going to guess I want that camera shot to last about 10 seconds. I think about 10 seconds is the right amount of time to show all that information, and it's going to look like we're kind of moving through the house at a rapid clip, but not too fast and not too slow. But again, this is just my best guess. So what we want the total time of this thing to be is 10 seconds. So here's how we're going to change it. We can change, you can see we can change the information in this white box, and we can change the information in this white box. We want to change the information in these two boxes in such a way that it says total time, and this ends up being 10 seconds. 20 seconds is the default. One other thing that we need to bear in mind is frames per second. This is, remember, animation is nothing more than the computer showing you a bunch of still images, and it flickers from one image to the next so quickly that your eye interprets it as motion. And usually 15 frames per second, 15 still images flickered in front of your eyes, 15 per second, is not enough imagery to look convincing. It looks like a flickery silent movie at 15 frames per second. DVDs tend to show images at about 30 frames per second. And I think DVDs look pretty good. They look like convincing motion. So I'm going to go ahead and change this right off the bat to 30. Whenever you're given a choice, whether you're doing animation in Revit or any other animation program or video editing software, wherever you get the opportunity to set frames per second, always set it for 30 and you're going to end up with animation that looks good. So we want this to be 30. We want total time to be 10. So what we have to do is change this one. Total frames. This is the total number of still images that Revit will create, and if it flicks through all those images at 30 frames per second, we should end up with a piece of animation that is 10 seconds long. So what I want to do is take 30 frames per second, multiply it by 10 seconds, and if I do that, the math should work out, and this should be 10 seconds. So 30 frames per second, that's correct. Let's go ahead and take this so we're going to multiply 30 frames per second by 10 seconds, and we get 300. Let's overtype 300 here. Even though 300 is showing up here, let's type it in again and hit tab. Or actually hit apply, I'm sorry. If we hit apply, look at this. This now changes. So 30 frames per second, that's what we want. Total frames, 300. It's 30 frames multiplied by 10 seconds, 300 total frames. And when we hit apply, this corrects. This automatically updates. So we end up with a piece of film that's 10 seconds long. Like I said, 10 seconds is just my best guess. I'm not going to know until the piece of animation is finished whether or not that's too fast or too slow. But my best guess is that 10 seconds will work. At this point, we can now hit OK. Now we've got everything set up. Let's go ahead and render our animation. Let's have the computer create all 300 of those frames and show us what it looks like running at 30 frames per second. So we're going to go up to our blue R up at the upper left corner of the screen here. And we're going to go to the drop-down menu, and we're going to go to Export. And the thing that we want to export is animation. So let's see if we can kind of scroll down. We may need to scroll down. Here we go. If we get to the very bottom here under export, we've got images and animation. And if we hover our cursor over it, we've got walkthrough. That's what we want to export. So we're going to click on walkthrough. Let's see. It's going to say output length, all frames or frame range. Just go with all frames. Just assume that the entire piece of animation is what you want to export. If you want to snip off the beginning of it or a few seconds at the end, you can do that using editing software. I would just say, just go with the default and say all frames. I think we don't want to mess with the dimensions here. Just leave these as they are. So whatever comes up, and it may not necessarily be 576 by 432, but whatever numbers come up for the dimensions, just leave those as they are. Leave realistic with edges. We set that earlier. Zoom to 100% of actual size. That's fine. That's what we want. So all these settings are pretty good. 30 frames per second, total time 10 seconds. We have not changed anything here. Don't ever check this stamp. Check this box. Include time and date stamp. What that will do is it will put a running digital clock in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and suddenly your animation looks like security camera surveillance footage. So we don't want that. So I think we've left everything the same here. So we're going to hit OK. And that's going to ask you where you want to save it. Let's just put it on the desktop and give it a name that is easy to recognize. House on the Hill Walkthrough 1. I might actually even put -A. The idea being if this gets processed and I don't like it and I need to re-render it maybe at a slower rate or a faster rate, that could be House on the Hill Walkthrough 1-B or 1-C. And this gives me some options. So it's very likely I may have to go back and re-render it if I'm not happy with the speed. Just give each one a slightly different name so you recognize what it is. And we're going to save this as an AVI file. I don't think we have a choice as to, yeah, AVI is, all these others are just still images, so we want to save this as an AVI file on the desktop, and we're going to hit save. And then when the window comes up asking you about video compression, instead of doing full frames uncompressed, set it for Microsoft Video 1. That will ensure that your animation is compatible with Windows Movie Maker. Go ahead and then hit OK. And we're going to see how long this takes. There we go. Something's happening. Okay, great. So we're seeing our first image here. It's going to very slowly run through the entire, I think we're on picture number 2. So this may actually take a while. You can kind of see here at the bottom of the screen, it'll tell you where we are. We're, okay, 3D view, walkthrough 1. We're now on frame 11 of 300. So it's got to render all 300 frames. We're on number 12 here. So I'm going to pause it so you don't have to sit through watching all 300 frames be rendered. And I'll just resume once we're done with the rendering process. Okay, now we've gone through all 300 frames and the whole process in theory has rendered. Let's go ahead and watch our animation. So let's reduce this down, and where is, geez, I got so much stuff on here. Where is my, okay, House on the Hill Walkthrough right here. So if I double click on this, there we go, we bust through the window. Boy, this can look, there we go, through between the people down the hallway. And there it is, 10 seconds. Probably I'd want to stretch that out. I'd probably want to add more furniture and lengthen it. 10 seconds seems to be too rapid fire for everything that's going on. It takes a certain amount of practice to set up your paths. You could see this looked like a crazy crazy driver just kind of making their way through the house here. Everything's kind of herky-jerky. It does take a certain amount of practice. So give some thought to where you want your camera to pass through, what you want to see. Maybe I was trying to show too much stuff in one shot. Maybe just some real fewer turns, and where the turns occur, where you have your camera turning, make it much more gentle curving surfaces, curving paths. It might be actually better to do a whole bunch of shorter shots. Maybe instead of one long shot trying to wrap your way through the house and show everything, maybe just a few 4-second, several 4-second long shots, just showing the camera, having the camera move in a straight line, just showing one item or another item. But this is the process that you use, and this, like I said, this will take some practice. Kind of work out beforehand how you want your camera to pass through. But this is the process that you employ to create some animation. I'm going to close this, reduce this down, open up Revit again. But that's what you do. And then once you've got a series of these walkthrough animated sequences that you're happy with, then you can go ahead and use an editing software. The easiest one to use that I've found that's free is Windows Movie Maker. You can use that software to weave together your smaller, your snippets of animation, your walkthrough pieces that you've created, and you can use transitions to transition from one shot to the next. You can include still images, you can put on opening credits and closing credits and music and that sort of thing. But the building block of animation is the walkthrough, just these individual shots that get edited together. And this is the process for creating that in Revit.